Good afternoon, everybody. Welcome to another edition of Beer Matters with me, Gordon Tate. This is the latest in a mini-series about the microbreweries of Burton-on-Trent. The last time we visited the newest, Burton Tower Brewery. This time I think we've come to the most impressive. This is the Tower Brewery. It's based on Glensill Way and it's a most impressive building, as you can see. And we're here to meet John Mills, who is the owner, proprietor, head brewer and chief cook and bottle washer. John.
Hi, Gordon.
Nice to see you again.
Nice to see you. And you, sir.
John, as you know, I'm a regular visitor to your emporium, and I want one of the listeners to find a little bit more about the background and the history of the Tower Brewery. Yeah. So, shall we sit down and have a chat?
Indeed.
But before we get onto the background of the brewery itself, tell me a little bit about your background and how you got started in brewing.
Started doing a bit of home brewing with one of my friends in the early days, fairly unsuccessfully. Good fun, but didn't taste very nice. And then subsequently got to know the guys at Burton Bridge when I was drinking in there. And then subsequently went and worked for Jeff and Bruce for 10 years.
So that's where you actually learnt the trade of how to become a brewer?
That's right, yeah. Bruce's fault, yeah.
So your initial sort of trials and things didn't put you off?
No, this was many moons ago, but no, I've always enjoyed beer like most of the lads in Burton. So, but yeah, I was lucky enough to bump into Bruce one day and he was looking for somebody initially as a driver, and I said, well, I'll do a bit of driving for you, but I'd be more interested in getting involved with the brewing side, and I did.
But Bruce is the head brewer at the Burton Bridge Brewery. Probably the oldest established microbrewery, if you want to call it.
One of the oldest, yeah, definitely. Yeah.
Okay. And then, so how did you come to start this particular venture?
Well, I was supposed to be taking the brewing side off Jeff and Bruce, but it didn't financially didn't stack up. But I'd looked at this building to raise some capital to buy them. And I thought, well, I'll have a go on my own. So in 2000, I bought this place.
Brave decision.
Well, brave or stupid. Yeah.
Well, hopefully it's turned out to be a good one.
It's worked out. I mean, it's had its better moments, but you know, it's anybody who works for themselves, it's always a bit of a challenge, whatever you do. But yeah, I've enjoyed it. Really enjoyed it.
Tell us a little bit about the actual building itself.
Well, it was part of Walsich Maltings, which Walsich was an area name of this part of Burton, and Salts & Co, who actually built the place in 1875, and this was the water supply for 3 malt houses on this site.
Okay. So and then it was used as an actual malting.
It was purely for water supply for the maltings.
Oh, just the water supply. Yeah. Okay. Yeah. And hence the
name,
the tower.
Yeah, because the water tank is 2 floors up in the front.
Okay, that's interesting. And you've turned a water tower into
a brewery,
into an actual brewery.
Yeah.
And where does your water come from?
I use Towns water. I was again a little bit excited when I first purchased the place, because in the deeds there was rights to the borehole, but unfortunately the borehole was about 50 yards to the front of the building and had been blanked some years before, so that wasn't to be. It wasn't to be.
Because I know that Burton is famous for its water.
Absolutely,
and hence all the different breweries going back over the years. So what year did it actually stop performing its duties?
1957 was the year it stopped production. This site was, but at that point they were actually owned by Bass. Because Bass had bought them out in 1927, because Salts were also brewers, and they bought them for £1.1 million, which in 1927 was a lot of money.
That was the brewery.
That was the brewery side, yeah. But they kept the maltings open here for Bass, and then, as I say, closed in 57.
And in the interim, what
It's been used for various bits. It was an engineering company for a number of years under a couple of names, but when I actually came here, it had been empty for 7.5 years. So
it's nice for an attractive building to be reused, and especially back into the brewing.
I mean, the nice thing for me, it was also the whole site actually was owned by, it was actually a Danish company who owned the whole site, and they'd split it up to try and sell it off, and the only other people who'd looked at this bit wanted to knock it down for the reclaim and put a new unit on it. And I had a word with this guy and I said what I wanted to do, and he said, well, I'll sell it to you. So that worked in my favour.
Did you get any help from sort of venture capital or any help from the local authorities?
No, it's all in-house.
It's all on your own, off your own back. That's excellent. So, can we now just perhaps have a brief look around at some of the equipment that you actually use here?
Yeah.
So, there's a little bit of noise in the background, not too much, and presumably coming from some of this operational machinery. Can you just explain to us the different vessels and what they do and the process?
All right, well, in this particular room, this is the brewhouse itself, and this vessel immediately behind me is the mash tun, which is the conversion tank. So the starches in the grain is converted into sugar in the mashing. And then from the mash tun, it comes around behind me in this taller tank. To my left here is the copper, and in the copper, that is where the wort, as it's called, which is the sugar solution you're extracting from your malt, is boiled, and the first lot of hops that go in there are the hops that give it the bitterness to the finished product.
Just explain that, because some people understand about when the hops go in makes the difference in terms of the end.
The bittering hops normally pitched in at boil, and during the rolling boil that you get in the copper, the hop oils are released from the hop seeds into the wort, therefore to give the bitterness characteristic of the finished beer.
And that'll be different for different brews?
Depending on what hop you're using, quantities, etc.
Okay.
Yeah.
Talking about hops, what hop varieties do you actually use?
The bulk of what I use are English for my sort of traditional beers, but for my IPA I use a New Zealand hop, Pacific Gem, and I use Chinook, which is an American hop.
And all
so
give
higher what they call alpha acids, which are the oils, and the higher the level of acidity oils, the more bitterness characters you get.
It's all part of the magic of the brew itself. And now you refer to this vessel as the copper.
Yeah.
It's patently not copper.
No, back in the day they were.
It's all stainless steel.
It's all stainless steel. I mean, virtually every brewery you go to these days is stainless steel. And in fact, this part of the operation, the Brewhouse, was built by Malrex, which is a little company just down the road. Okay. And then John Collett, a good friend of mine, he's made a couple of vessels in the back in the fermenting room as well. So it's all locally produced. Fabrication. Yeah.
And then from there then into the fermenting.
No, in fact, from the copper, it then goes into the hop back, this vessel in between, which is where the late hop goes in, and the hop aroma, and that's the nicest, well, my particular favourite time of the day, is when the hop wort is ejected out of the copper into the hop back, and the smell in here is wonderful.
We're not on smell-o-vision.
Smell-o-vision, no, unfortunately.
And how do you clean these out then? Do you actually have to
physically? You do actually have to get into them. I mean, I'll be starting a caustic brew tomorrow. I do one of those every week.
Okay. So obviously an operation like this is a huge investment.
Yeah.
And I understand you've got some more new equipment on.
In the back room, in the fermenting room, we've got another 5,000 litre vessel going in the next couple of weeks, and I've just got a new cooling unit coming in next week as well. So, but I've added. It's not all been done in one hit. I've been doing it as I've gone along.
And it's very important to keep.
Well, you got to keep your eye on the money.
Okay. Yeah. So you mentioned the hops.
Yeah.
What about the barleys?
Well, the barleys, I use. I've used a couple of malts in my time. I use Baird's now, which are from over Lincolnshire way, based at Grantham. Most of the source is from Norfolk, the actual grain. But it's malted in Grantham.
So very much a British operation.
Yeah. With Brexit, it's easier if you keep it in house, isn't it?
So all the process then, what does that result in? How many different brews and how many different brands do you actually produce?
I've got my little bar which is open every Friday.
Which we'll have a look at shortly.
Which we'll go and have a look at. I've always got three of my own beers in there. I've got three sort of core brands, which is an IPA, I've got a darker one gone for a Burton, and then a traditional Tower bitter. But then I do, if I get a chance, if I've got room for them, I do seasonal. But a good chunk of what I do is for bottling, and I do 2 products into bottles.
Where does your bottling actually?
Morrison's, just the other side of Burton, do all my bottling.
So everything's done locally?
Yeah.
Okay, excellent. So all this talk of beer and brewing is making me thirsty. I think it's about time I tried one of these products that John's been telling us about. Over to you, John.
All right, I'm going to pour you a Tower bitter, 4.2, traditional bitter, with 2 English hops in it, Bramlin Cross and North Down, so hopefully you'll enjoy it, sir.
And is this what you would you class this as your session beer?
Yes, indeed, mate, yeah. There we go. Over to you, sir.
I was weaned on Tetley bitter in Leeds, which was about 3.8%.
Oh, this is 4.2.
It's just about the right strength for a nice session beer.
It is.
It's a nice creamy head.
Good elf.
Drinks very smoothly. It's malty. It's just got enough bitterness to make you want more. I could certainly drink plenty of that, John, I would think.
Cheers, Gordon.
So you've already told me about when you started and the help that you got from Bruce and Jeff at the Burton Bridge.
Yeah.
What about since you set your own operation up here? Any other help and advice from other people?
I've had various bits of help over the years, and Harry White is a good friend of mine. I was introduced to many years ago, who is ex-Bass and Coors, and he was his official title, as you've got written down here, was the president of the Institute of Brewers. Yeah, but when I first got to know him, he was actually global technical director for Coors, so he knew his stuff.
He knows his stuff.
So people like that. I mean, that's a great thing about Burton, is that you go into most pubs in Burton, there's somebody who knows more about beer than you do. So if you've got any questions, you can normally get them answered.
Oh, and finally, then, John, I understand that your normal opening hours of Friday evenings for the little bar area.
Yeah, my little bar's open 4 till midnight on a Friday, and then Saturdays we do a lot of private functions, but we also do music nights on Saturdays, which are ticketed events. Yeah.
And you've got anything in the pipeline?
On the music side, we've got a tribute, Kid Sabian tribute on the 7th of December. That's the only one this side of Christmas, but just keep an eye on the website.
Come along to that and have a good evening here. Anyway, John, thank you ever so much for your very interesting stories.
Thank you.
All the best.
Thank you.
So one of the people that John mentioned who was very helpful to him in the initial stages of setting up was Harry White, who I've already mentioned was the ex-president of the Institute of Brewing. Harry, nice to see you.
Hi. Pleased to meet you. Pleased to be here.
Tell us a little bit about your background, your history involved in brewing.
Oh, well, I came to Burton in the mid-70s. Started work for Bass and stayed with them for over 30 years, and various roles on the technical side. I was director of quality for 15 years, and ended my career with Malts and Coors. So I.
Malts and Coors being the company who took over the.
Malts and Coors took over Bass, what was beloved of Bass, in 2002. Yeah. So I spent most of my adult life in the brewing industry, on the production side.
And what was your interest and involvement in John's operation?
Oh, John's was interesting because it was small scale, hands-on, and he was looking for a bit of advice and support in the early days, and I guess the key thing was I liked John's beers right from the outset, and I like John, and I like the setup here. I find it's to me it's very special. It's tucked away in the backwaters of Burton-on-Trent, but it's a cosy, special atmosphere which John and his team have created. Well, his team, John and Karen, I suppose, and I know his father helped him set this up. But for anybody who's worked in the brewing industry and in breweries as long as I have, it was great to come here and see such a super setup, and the hygiene and housekeeping in particular I've always thought were superb and help contribute towards the beers.
Very, very different in terms of scale compared to the setup at Bass, Molson Coors, that type of thing. But I guess the principles are still the same.
The principles are exactly the same. Yeah, I mean, we've had a number of breweries within the Bass group which were doing over Burton were doing over 4 million barrels a year, but the principles stay exactly the same, and it comes down to getting some simple basics absolutely right. One of us already mentioned about hygiene and housekeeping, but just attention to detail. And what I've always said to John right from the outset, we're talking about his beers, and I've got his India Pale Ale here, is his high gravity bitter, is just the importance of achieving a balance. People always ask me what's the key to a good beer, and well, that's a 2 or 3 pint debate at least. But to me, it's all about striking the right balance in flavour between the malt and the hops, and the salts levels and the sugar levels. It's a very complex. It's as much an art as it is a science. But it's getting that balance right and knowing the key to achieving that balance and keeping in control.
And do you think John achieves that?
Yeah, I do. Most of the time, yes. I do, and that's why I keep coming back here most Friday afternoons.
And I noticed the one that you're actually drinking, and that's the Imperial Pale Ale.
Yeah, what he calls Imperial. It's John's version of an East India Pale Ale, which was the beer that made Burton famous back in the 1830s, 40s, and onwards all throughout the 19th century.
Higher hopped, more hop.
Higher hop
percentage.
rate, yes, but again to balance off the higher gravity of the beer, but it also give it preserving powers. It could travel all the way over to India, where there were some very thirsty soldiers and civil servants, and it arrived there and was dropped bright, so it looked good, it looked the part, and it was easy to drink, and it created a huge market.
Because the India Pale Ale, of course, IPAs are very, very popular at the moment. They've almost become trendy. Again, with
a lot of beers,
etc.
A lot of beers have given that acronym of IPA, which are and it gets dumbed down a lot. You've got to know what to look for to find something which is original and a genuine IPA.
True IPA.
Well, when I came to Burton, I became introduced to draft Bass, which, and I say I was fortunate to the latter part of my career to be responsible for the quality of Mr. Bass's beers, and so I reckon I've met enough people in and around Burton-on-Trent and who knew how to brew India Pale Ale, and I've taken those tenets, those messages onwards. There was draft Bass to me was the ultimate, and White Shield Worthington, if I could name drop.
Which is still brewed in small quantities at the Brewing Museum, I understand.
Well, it's brewed in the main brewery of Molson Coors, but only on, as you say, in very, very small limited quantities. And
Well, Harry, it's been lovely to speak to you. John speaks very, very highly of you in terms of help and advice. All your knowledge and experience has obviously rubbed off on him to a certain extent. So.
Well, that's good to know. When you've worked in the industry long enough, it's nice to be able to hand something back and hand something on to future generations.
Excellent.
So if I can do that, that's great.
Keep coming down on the Fridays.
I will do that. Thank you.
So my thanks to John and Harry for a very informative insight into the workings of a microbrewery. I hope you can join me again for another edition of Beer Matters with me, Gordon Tate. Cheers, my dears.